there's such a disconnect that we step into when we're stuck in one phase, right? When we're stuck in these archetypes because we feel like we're supposed to be in order to reach the success that we've defined for ourselves. And it isn't until we give ourselves permission to lean into this rhythm that we then all of a sudden start to see everything from a different perspective and understand that there's a superpower in all of it, and that all of it will feed what it is that we want for our life, that we're not losing anything. If anything, we're gaining by leaning into this rhythm more.
I am so excited to bring this next episode to you. Dr. Sonya Jensen, naturopathic physician, joins me, and we take a deep dive into female hormone cycles and leaning into the rhythm of your cycle. From this episode, you're going to take away exactly what your body is not only craving, but actually needing during different phases of your cycle. For instance, when should you fast? When should you not fast? When should you eat more carbs? When should you not have carbs? Do you want lighter meals or heavier meals? Are these times when you should plan a lot of social activities? Are these times when your body's naturally going to not want to have a lot of social activities? There's certain times in your cycle where you're going to be in a great state of mind to be problem solving. There are times in your cycle based on your hormones that you're going to have massive creative output. And so for someone who creates content or blogs or writing, leading meetings with your team, anything like that, these are going to be great times to plan that out. Sonya is someone that I literally reach out to multiple times throughout the month, and I ask her to remind me, what are the things going on during this time? Are these times when I should be making major commitments or not? In this episode, you're going to walk away with all of that information. You can literally plan your cycle in a way that's going to help you feel more balanced, harmonious, and effective, whether it's in your work life or your home life. We start this episode with Sonya sharing some of her incredible story and how she got into this and why she's so passionate about helping women lean into the rhythms of their cycle. Enjoy. Welcome, Dr. Sonya Jensen. I am so happy to finally have you on here. One of my most favorite people in my life. One of the girls I reach out to hold me accountable, to stretch me, to remind me to take leaps and get out of my comfort zone. Thank you for spending this time with me today.
Oh, thank you for having me. It's such a gift to have this hour with you. I know when I was getting ready for it, I was like, I just get to hang out with Melissa for an hour and chat and connect. And so thank you for being the bright light in my life. Like, you've given so much to me, and I'm so excited for you to be giving more of that to the world.
Thank you, Sonya. All right. So I met you and your husband, Nick, gosh, I don't know, 6 years ago. I don't even know how long ago at this time, at a Health Centers of the Future conference, and was quickly attracted to both of you. Nick and Sonya are both naturopathic physicians. They are Kundalini yoga instructors. They are parents of 2 beautiful boys. And, initially the attraction was that you're also someone who works with your husband, which I found very interesting. And then I am so in love with your mind and your brain and your energy. And I'm so excited to share all the incredible information that you have for women on their hormones and how to lean into the rhythm of their hormones. The tips that you have given me have changed my life so dramatically that this is going to be a podcast that people are going to want to have a notebook, a pen, pencil, paper out. You're going to want to take notes. So thank you.
Oh, thank you. I can't wait.
Yes. All right. So let's dive right in. I want to start with your book that recently came out. I highly recommend everyone grab this. It is called Woman Unleashed: Release Your Story, Revive Your Hormones, and Reclaim Your Freedom. And you couldn't have a more perfect title. And I have to ask, is this woman who is unleashed, is this you?
It's me. It is. Yes. When I was thinking about the title, I was actually going between 2. One was The Fragile Feminist, which is the poem that's on the first couple of pages of the book, and then Woman Unleashed. And the big thing that I've witnessed over my lifetime and what I've been through is that often we stay contained in a box or container that's been given to us by our culture or society or even our own selves because of the expectations that we have on ourselves. And I think we all women have this capacity to unleash the power that's actually within us, unleash the wisdom that's within us that we sometimes are too scared to do. So this is something that I had to learn to do over time. And my desire and hope was with this title that it would invoke some curiosity in women to do that for themselves.
Definitely does. So tell me more about that. Let's talk about your background. I know in the book you talk a lot about your upbringing in traditional Indian culture, and you had a pretty dramatic awakening through a falling out of a relationship. Can you tell everyone more about that?
Yeah, absolutely. So growing up in Canada, with this community behind me. So being from India, my parents really wanted to hold on to a lot of the values and what they knew to be true for themselves and their communities, while they were raising us. And when you're sitting in two different cultures as the first generation, you're kind of tiptoeing on both sides because you see the gifts of that culture. And the big one was community for me, and just always knowing that I had somebody that would have my back and somebody to rely on. And then you have the Canadian culture that gives you this glimpse of like a different kind of freedom that I felt I didn't have in my household just because of what my parents were trying to hold on to. So there wasn't really a lot of freedom for expression, freedom to get to know who you actually are, because there are so many rules that needed to be followed. And, as a parent now, I understand where that was coming from. But at that time, it's very confusing, especially when your brain is still developing, your hormones are changing, all of this is happening, and you're witnessing one way of life and another, and kind of trying to figure out where you fit in all of that. And a lot of my conditioning ruled every decision that I made, from the friends I had to what I chose as a, education path at that time, to who I chose to marry at a very young age, because I thought that's what I was supposed to do. And at age 13 is where I had like this really big awakening, because I was in this moment, or this fork on my pathway of either taking my life, because I was stuck in this cycle of anorexia and anxiety and depression, and not having a lot of control in my life and not knowing what to do with that. And then also this other side where I was still dreaming and wanting to be here. And in that moment, that day that I describe in the book, there was really this like voice or something that showed me that there is more to this, that all the pain that I'm feeling is temporary and I'm not alone. And once I started to uncover that, and especially in that relationship that I chose at that time, uncovered more of who I actually am. And that came through like many years of discovering who I am through the work that I was doing in naturopathic school. I had to make that decision to leave that relationship. And that was probably one of the hardest things that I did in my life, because that meant possibly that my whole community would turn their backs on me. And some of that did happen. And so I had to face that big fear that I had. And now fast forward, 15 years later, my life is very different, because I chose myself, because I chose something different that I know would serve me in this world and help me serve others.
You were born in Canada, right?
I was, yeah.
Okay. So you were raised in Canadian culture and also balancing the Indian culture that was in your home. So what are some things, like how did the Indian culture play out in your house as a little girl? Like, what did that look like? That was the conflict or struggle.
Yeah, absolutely. So one of the things is, simple things that may, for the listeners, be like, well, that doesn't even make any sense. I couldn't play sports. I couldn't wear certain things that showed my arms or my legs. I had to keep my hair a certain way. I couldn't really have friends over or go to birthday parties. I couldn't, do like the simple things that a teenage girl would want to do. And that wasn't a choice for me. So everywhere felt like there was a wall or a block. I grew up dancing. So that was one thing that I had that I could really like lean into all the time. But even that had restrictions. I couldn't dive deep into this gift that I had. So I had to choose accordingly to make sure that my parents were okay and happy with that. We weren't allowed to date. So you couldn't talk to boys, you couldn't have boyfriends, you couldn't do any of that. But then there was this expectation as soon as you went to university, you would find the one and tell your parents that this is the one I'm going to marry now. So
As
it's
you know
just there.
from so much experience.
Right? Exactly. Like you just figure it out on
Yeah,
that
yeah.
first date. And so there's all these things where, you would see in different households and my friends, and I would see the way the parents would communicate with the kids was so different, and just the freedom that they had to be themselves. So I always felt like I had this different personality at school, a different one at home where that was very quiet and just didn't want to say anything because I didn't want to rock the boat. And, I still ended up rocking the boat quite a lot in some of the decisions that I made, but there was always this restriction on my expression.
So I'm so curious, as a little girl living this life of what you're supposed to be like at home, what you're supposed to be like at school, what were you like at school? Like if you made connections with other children, did you show the version of the quiet girl that you're supposed to be at home? Did you act like this was who you were? What masks did you create? How did you show up?
Yeah, I think I created many masks, especially in high school. I would say elementary, there's still this like naive feeling of like, oh, isn't this normal the way I'm living? And I think it isn't until you get into your teens and you really start questioning your world. And so at school, I just spoke, like I was more expressive. My group of girlfriends, I would like joke around a lot, and I would just be who I thought was myself at that time. And then I would come home and take that mask off and just be with myself and my thoughts, and not super connected to my family, or my siblings who were a lot younger than me.
Wow. Okay. So it's like you were essentially living two separate lives. I know you talk a lot, and I'm so glad about that. You talk a lot about female health and hormonal health, and the piece that you bring to it is trauma and
Yeah.
how trauma impacts our hormones. And there's so many directions I want to go with that. And the one I want to start with, Sonya, is, I think for a lot of us women, we remember getting our period when we first got our period. And the feelings around it, at least for me, were shame and embarrassment,
Mm-hmm.
painful periods. And in your book, you talk a lot about how our traumas, which let's also define traumas, because I
Mm-hmm.
think not everyone understands. We do all have trauma. So let's talk about what those are. And then how do those specifically, in your opinion, impact our hormones?
Yeah, such a good question. So defining trauma, we often think about it as this like big event, right? Sometimes, whether it's molestation or you've lost a parent or been in an accident, like there's all these big T traumas, and we forget about the little micro traumas that we have in our everyday. And that could be at home, that could be in your mind because of your perception of what's supposed to be. It could be what happened at school with a friend or a bully. It could be something as simple as you draw this like beautiful drawing and you want to show it to somebody or a parent, and the parent's just busy doing something else and doesn't have time to look at it, not out of any fault, but maybe they truly are busy. But we take that on as like, oh, I'm not enough,
Mm-hmm.
or I'm not important enough for them to pause and look at what I have to offer to
Which
them.
can actually be really scary to hear as a parent, right? Because we give ourselves so much
Absolutely.
guilt, like I'm messing them up because I'm cooking and I can't. Oh my gosh, like do you play into that loop? I'm
Yes.
like, it's
Oh,
almost
all
like
the time.
when you know too much or you guilt yourself too much. So I didn't want to interrupt you, but I feel like that's important to
No,
talk
I think
about.
it's a good, like, something really interesting that I tap into a lot too in my own self as a parent, is that guilt and shame when you know so much, because you know what that's going to impact in our children. But what I remind myself is those little adversities that I went through and they are going through shapes them, shapes who they are. And so it also allows them to reflect, especially if after that moment, if I have that realization, oh, I shouldn't have been looking at my phone and I should have done this, I speak to them about it. I'll say, you know what, my phone isn't just for entertainment. It's actually my work is on my phone. So I'm sorry I couldn't put it down at that moment, but I'm here for you now. I
Love
think
that.
that's the difference
Yeah.
in shifting that guilt and shame, and also their reflection. They may still carry a story with them, but
Mm-hmm.
we're going to do the best that we can, and then help support them if they have created that story. So I think just creating that safe place for them to say, that didn't feel right for me, and for us to feel safe to say, hey, I'm sorry, I should have done this, but I needed to do this to
Yes.
help support the whole, right?
Absolutely. There's another podcast guest that I had on, the Parenting Junkie, and she's my friend Avital. She gave me a great tip, because I think a lot of the mom guilt we have in the struggle with our kids comes from the time on the phone. And
Yes.
it's not like we're always scrolling social media. Sometimes, yes, because it's a nice escape from the reality of what can be harder, if I'm being completely honest. And I've worked on that. But also, like, our work is on our phone. So the Parenting Junkie Avital said, make sure you're telling them what you're doing. Because like in our mom's age, we'd see them looking at our soccer schedule, or, the menu for wherever, the restaurant, like tell them, okay, I'm just going to do this exact thing, kind of name it, and then explain, and I'll be with you in a second.
Yeah, I love that. I think just having that open communication is so good, because they also then know to do that. Because I talk to Nick often, our kids are young now, but at some point when they have their phones and their little life, they're going to do the same thing, because we've modeled that for them. So I think that's such a beautiful like reframe for mommy guilt, because we carry so much of it in so many different ways.
Right. And doing that, creating that conversation brings us into the same world, instead of like, I'm over here on my phone and you're over there. Like, we're talking about this together, what we're doing.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And so like the way that forms our hormones in our brain in those moments is like, one, we have a certain foundation from birth. And even before that, there's actually studies that show Holocaust survivors, for example. This is a study that I put in my book. I think the woman's name is Rachel Yehuda. She studies intergenerational trauma. And she saw that all of their offsprings had adrenal insufficiency. So adrenals, we know, are the glands that help us or stay supported during a time of stress. It's going to give us that resilience. It's going to give us the hormones we need to adapt to stress. So many of these children, to Holocaust survivors, are born with adrenal insufficiency. And then they studied the grandchildren, and they saw a lot of the grandchildren were more susceptible to diseases like metabolic syndrome and also heart disease, because of that inability for their body to adapt to this stress. So what happened the generation before will impact our foundation on how we deal with stress when that trauma shows up in our life.
That's incredible. I think in at least the natural wellness space, people talk a lot about generational toxicity, right? We, as women, before we get pregnant, we need to spend a good chunk of time cleaning out our health, our toxins, because that gets passed down to our babies. They found it in the umbilical cords. But there's also this trauma that passes down through the generations. So you're saying literally the woman who was a Holocaust survivor obviously lived a lot of her life in a very high state of survival, fight or flight. Her children's children were born with that imprint.
Yes.
And so then if we want to loop back around and talk about tools to help change that, it's literally my favorite quote. Every woman who heals herself heals her children's children.
That's right. Yeah. Right? 7 generations before is what's been mapped out, and 7 generations ahead of us. So if we choose to heal now, we're healing so much of that lineage that feeds us and nourishes us, but can also deplete us because of the story that's been carried. So when we were already present in our grandmother's womb, so that's our maternal grandmother. So when our mother was being born or was being created in our grandmother's womb, the eggs were already being created. We were already being created. So of course that imprint is going to be carried generations forward.
Wow.
So then and that's our foundation. And then when we're in the womb, we're noticing and witnessing and hearing things from our environment according to our mother's responses, according to her hormones. They will inform our body on how to look, how to be. So we're already starting this masking from being a fetus, because we have to do everything that we can to survive when we come out of that womb and out of that safety. And then as we're born, we're looking for information from our environment, people's expressions, people's tones, people's everything. So we know how to behave and act in order to feel safe, in order to survive. And then at age 3, we have this surge of our first DHEA, which is like our counterpart to cortisol. And then we have another surge at around age 6. So constantly our body's being informed about its environment and how much hormone the body needs. And as we move into like the years before puberty, and we're developing our estrogens and progesterones and all the things, everything that we experience in that time is going to inform our sex hormones and our stress hormones. So if our stress hormones are being informed more, it's taking away from the sex hormones. And then that will dictate how we transition into puberty and even beyond that.
Wow. Wait, so what age would that period be? Before your
So
period?
before your period, exactly. So
But what,
thalarchy. So yeah, when when a young girl first starts getting a little bit of her breast buds, and there's
yeah.
some changes in her hormones, and now we're seeing that earlier than we did before. So before you would kind of start seeing that, around age 9 and up. Now you're starting to see that even around age 6 for some girls, because now they're getting their periods at age 9. So there's usually about a 2-3 gap between this like pre-puberty period and when you actually start bleeding in puberty.
Got it. So those years play a pretty massive role in addition to the
That's right.
generational, which we have a
That's
little bit
right.
less control over for our daughters.
Yeah.
Those play a pretty massive role in how their hormones and
Yeah.
their periods going to play out.
Yeah, absolutely. And then now here we are, we step into puberty, we start bleeding. And like you were saying, the first emotion that often young women will feel is shame and embarrassment when we don't know that this relationship is one that needs to be nurtured from before. Like many cultures around the world will have an honoring ceremony for the young woman so that she can start to honor that bleed and know that this is her superpower, that this is what's going to allow her to move the generations forward. This is what's going to allow her to be tuned in to her children, to the other children of the world, to the moon, to the earth, to everything. And yet we've wrapped so much shame around it with the marketing that's around selling you your tampons and your birth control and everything that we can do to block this superpower so that life is more convenient and busy. Mm-hmm. So if we don't change that conversation, women step into this period thinking that it's a burden rather than a gift.
Mm-hmm. Oh gosh, so important. Okay, so then what about, do you want to just go ahead and span like the challenges throughout the different phases of the cycle?
Yeah, and one of the biggest challenges I would say, so you spoke about pain, right? Mm-hmm. And often in the beginning, when we first start menstruating, it takes 12 years for ovulation to settle itself, for LH to actually be able to do its job well. It's trying to figure itself out. So imagine in those 12 years, so imagine a young woman starts menstruating at age 12, up to 24, her brain is still trying to figure it out. But often around that age, if she's got pain, acne, irregular cycles, maybe she's sexually active now, she's given birth control as the tool. Mm-hmm. Birth control, we know, blocks that communication. It blocks LH, it blocks ovulation. So now we've created this story where she can't be tuned in. Mm-hmm. All these changes that are now happening in her brain, according to the birth control, according to this exogenous hormone that's changing her relationship to everything. So throw in the level of stress or trauma or things that she experienced before to now confusion because of this exogenous hormone. It's really hard to know who you are mm-hmm. during that time and during those phases.
At a time when you're figuring out who you are anyway.
Yes.
Probably for so many reasons.
Yeah,
or do you feel like is that the main reason that kind of plays out during those years in our life? Do you think it's hormonally based? Like,
absolutely.
Who am I friends with? It's those awkward teen years.
Yeah, I think that's a huge part of it. I don't know if it's the whole story, but I think that is a time in our life where we're seeking this, because the ego starts developing around age 2. And as it's developing, we're trying to like gather our independence in those young years. And come puberty, we're trying to find out where we fit in now in society. What is our actual role? Because now we are women now. So mm-hmm. now there's this challenge with mom, right? Here's another woman in the house. Now I'm a woman. Where do I sit in this family tree? Where do mm-hmm. I sit in society? How do I figure myself out while still being a part of this unit where I'm being told what to do and what to wear and how to be, mm-hmm. right? So there's so much of that. And then hormonally, the brain is still developing. The brain is still trying to figure out what hormones we need and what we don't need according to how we're perceiving our environment. So those are some pretty hard and confusing years. And what happens is, young women will feel depressed. Young women will feel anxious. And what we've done is we've labeled it that it's a problem instead of saying, hey, you know what, that anger that you're feeling because you're trying to figure out who you are, that's okay. I'm here to be here for you. Mm-hmm. Like my son one day was saying, like, sometimes I don't even know why I'm angry.
Same. And I said the same. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So I just had to say, and that's okay. there's so much going on in your body. There's so much going on in your brain that you'll figure it out. And even if you don't, just sit with that and you can ask it a question. It doesn't have to take over your entire being. It's okay. But often we're not getting that response. If we're showing up with anger as a teen, it's being matched with anger because our parents didn't have the tools. We didn't know what to do. Everybody did the best that they could.
Yeah. And I mean, I know I said it before, I don't mean to sound like a broken record, but it's part of the intention of this podcast. Like when my goal is to impact children, and the way we impact children is by impacting the mothers and the fathers, but I really want to impact the mothers. And when we heal ourselves, we can have those conversations with our kids in the moment. So when we have big trauma, little trauma, and we haven't healed it, and our kid shows up angry, it triggers us and we go into anger. And I've noticed just from some of the work that I've done, and, very similarly to the values that you have with your boys, when Levi around 11 was like, I'm just angry and I don't even know why, and I can't control it. And he was like, he literally punched a hole in the wall. I could have shown up and blasted him with, why he shouldn't have done this and all that. And I took a conscious moment to like take a breath and match him where he was and realize the pain that he was going through, and that he had no idea why these feelings were coming up in his body, and they were strong and scary. And so we ended up flipping it into like this really funny conversation. We talked about the funny changes that are starting to happen in your body that happened to daddy. And that's why he is how he is. He's big and he's strong and he's hairy. And here's some things you can do with that anger. You can sit with it. We can sit together. I'll sit next to you while you're angry. You don't have to be happy for me.
Yeah.
We ended up, he pushed his legs into his bed frame and it wouldn't move. And it just felt really good to like resist. But, I know you said those conversations are so important, and I 100% agree with you. I think that's so important to do with our children and our partners and ourselves.
Yes. Yeah. You said some really important things there. It reminded me of a story of my son too. One time he was angry and I'm like, okay, let's do this. Let's just punch a pillow. Ooh. And I just joined him, and we actually bought a punching bag so that we could go out there. I'm like, yeah, sometimes we just need an outlet, and anger can fuel action. So what is it that you want to do for yourself to feel some action in your life? So we started having those conversations. And the other important piece that you touched on with being the mom is the pause. So I have a lot of those pause moments in my book for a reason, because I do feel like Viktor Frankl says, our freedom lies between the stimulus and the response. And there's a Buddhist story too, where the Buddha was, teaching, and one of his students asked about suffering. And he then asked the student, well, if somebody threw an arrow at you and it pierced your skin and your body, would that hurt? And he said, yes, of course it would hurt. And then the Buddha said, okay, if a second arrow shows up in the same spot, is it going to hurt less or more? And of course, it's going to hurt more. So he was describing the second arrow as our reaction to the first arrow. So the first arrow, sometimes we can't control. It's just there. But the second arrow we can control, and often we don't control it because we're quick to react to something because of an old trauma, because of an old story, an old trigger, and not realizing that it's not even us who's speaking or reacting. But if we can pause, take a breath, understand that this is temporary, what's going on right now, we can show up in such a different way with that pause.
I love that. There's so many messages from this that are takeaways. Like I said, this is a pen and a paper and a pad one. Pen, paper, and a pad. That's a lot of paper. And you're going to want it. But that is so huge. So huge. Because you think about when we're upset in a reactive state, we hang on to it. And then you leave your house and you're in traffic and you honk. And that upsets the person in front of you. And then you're at the grocery store and you're mad that the line's long. And so you're huffing and puffing in the back, and that impacts everyone around you. You take it out of the cash register person, then they go home and they take it. Like, it has such an ample effect that we can literally stop it in that moment by taking a pause and reflecting and choosing how we want to respond rather than react. I love that. And I love your pauses in the book. I did the quiz. I love the quiz to figure out whether you're, what is it, a diva, a duchess, or a damsel?
Damsel, yeah. Yeah.
I think I'm the Duchess. Is that what
Are
you think?
you? Yeah, yeah.
Uh-huh.
And the other thing with that, though, I feel like we're a little bit of each of those in different
Mm-hmm.
moments of our life. Sometimes we have to be the Duchess. Sometimes we are the damsel, and sometimes we are that diva. So I think when we start to understand those archetypes and their gifts, and also the challenges that can show up if we're stuck in one, the
Mm-hmm.
the gift of all of it is to understand how we can come in and out of those three
Ooh,
archetypes.
love it.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So now I want to talk more about you. I mean, you obviously had
Mm-hmm.
like this really challenging upbringing in your culture, and
Mm-hmm.
you've done a complete 180 on your life, right? You have an
Mm-hmm.
amazing husband.
Mm-hmm.
Would you say that was like one of the biggest, let's call it
Mm.
traumatic experiences that you would say set you on this trajectory of who you are today?
Yeah, I would say so. That one decision, because that came from remembering my other traumas that I had from a young age. At the age of 8, knowing that I was molested then, at the age of 19, knowing what happened to me then, just having these memories show up for me. And those actually showed up when there was a different trauma, a big loss in our family. And it just kind of threw me for a loop and brought up all these traumas that happened to me before that also gave me this aha moment of like, oh, this is why I am the way I am because of what happened to me.
Mm-hmm.
And so once I understood that and made the decision to leave my marriage from before, it opened up this whole path of self discovery. And that I think is what allowed me to attract Nick into my life so that we could do that together. And he's been such a great partner in allowing me space to actually heal and so that we could grow together. And there's no such thing as perfection in a relationship, but I think what we do for each other is keep each other accountable, keep each other in a space of growth, and really help each other understand that all that we're experiencing is temporary and that we have the tools to help explore more of our growth and what we need. So I do feel like that one decision helped me, just it changed the whole trajectory of my life.
Mm-hmm, definitely. And you guys, I mean, just being in your presence, any of these listeners, if they've seen you online on your guys' Health Ignited podcast, which I just love, you guys have a very calm, soothing energy. And so before we pivot into the next part, which is where we're
Mm-hmm.
going to take notes, the listeners should take notes on the leaning into the rhythm of the cycle. I want to ask, what do you feel like you guys have done to help elevate yourself and clear out some of
Yeah.
these traumas so that you can be so calm and centered? Because I know that's important for you, for your children.
Yeah, for sure. We definitely have our daily practices, but those came from that journey of self-discovery. So both of us, we moved to Southeast Asia for like 2 years after we graduated naturopathic school, and we did that very intentionally so that we could go deeper into our healing, and just came across so many teachers and healers that help support that self-discovery, from shamans to yoga teachers and all of that. And I have to say, for myself, all of that landed when I became a mother. When I became pregnant with my first, he really helped me go more internal. And I took on yoga teacher training at that time. I really stepped more into meditation and stepped more into breath work and movement and really understanding myself at a deeper level. And through that, I was able to show up for my patients in a very different way. And as I did that, then my second, when I was pregnant with him, he's like Mr. Action. So he like forced me to bring that wisdom and knowledge out so that I could share it with the world. So it's interesting when their little personalities, when I look at that and I tune into where I was in my life at that time, it's like they brought out things in me that I needed. And
Mm.
now we help to anchor into that every single day. Like we both have our practices in the morning. We both have the things that we do to help keep our mind, body, and spirit in a place of just, I don't really like to use the word balance, but in a space of like growth and
Harmony.
inquiry,
Mm-hmm.
harmony,
Harmony.
exactly,
Mm-hmm.
in rhythm,
Mm.
so that we can keep showing up every day.
Love that. Oh, love you guys. And are the boys starting to take on, like, do they watch the things you're doing? I'm sure you're
Mm-hmm.
providing such incredible role modeling. What are they starting to dip into? And
Yeah,
remind me
yeah.
of their ages, because I think they're close to our boys' age, right? Like,
They are, so they're 11 and 8.
okay.
And so the 11-year-old definitely, because he's such a thinker. He's a little philosophy guy, and he's a builder, and so he's always kind of thinking and witnessing and noticing. And he, from the start, because I've been like meditating since forever, he, when he was younger, would tap into that more. Like, just randomly I would hear him singing. I remember when one year when he was quite young, there was that big earthquake in Thailand. And I remember like thinking like, okay, how can we support them? And he was asking me all these questions, and I was driving to my parents' house, and all of a sudden in the back I hear him chanting. And I'm like, oh, and I just like, I let him do it. And after, I'm like, oh, like, who were you chanting for? Or like, what was like, why did you decide to do that? He's like, well, I don't know how else to help them. So I thought if I pray for them, then I can help the kids that are in Thailand.
Oh my
So I know it
gosh.
makes you
You're like,
teary because,
I am a good mom.
right? We are planting
It is
seeds.
working.
Yeah. So I think just,
Oh.
they see how we eat, they see how we are with our relations, they see how we are with each other. And it's not perfect, but I think that's important to show them too, that we don't have to be perfect, that as long as we're making the conscious decision to grow and to understand and to shift and pivot when we need to, I do feel like those seeds are being planted in just how he's eating. Like, he's becoming quite the athlete now. So he'll ask, oh, what can I do to help my game? What do I need to, oh, I don't feel good. Just 2 weeks ago, he was starting to feel like there's a bit of a cold coming on. What do I need to do? And he stepped into that routine. My youngest is a different story. I think he's going to be my rebel guy that shows up with McDonald's one day just to like show me
To teach you,
yeah, that I got autonomy over my
challenge.
life, just to
Yeah.
teach me something else.
Uh-huh.
But he too, he's more of a reactor than proactive. So when he's sick, he'll say, okay, now you can give me the things. So I do know there's still seeds being planted with both of them, but it's
Yeah.
just showing up differently.
So
Yeah.
amazing. Same house, completely different, right?
Right.
And both
Yeah.
showing up to teach you something always.
Absolutely. Yeah. All the time.
Okay, so one of my favorite things that Dr. Sonya does is you have laid out literally week by week for females what our cycles do,
Yeah.
what's happening from a hormonal level, and then the piece I love of you, I don't even know what is the appropriate word, spiritual, connected, like what we do with that. So are we more active? What do we eat? What are, is this a social commitment time or a time to say no?
That's right.
So I love this. Definitely, I think everyone should get out their paper and take notes, because I use this literally. I know one of our assistants in the office, she knows when I'm going to get my period. I'm like, I'm going to be writing. Be prepared. There's going to be a lot of content coming. Like, she just knows, different phases, how it's going to show up.
Yeah. It's such an important thing.
Okay, so let's go. I even have my little notes right here from stuff that you've taught me. Okay, so let's start with phase one. The bleed, right?
The
So
bleed,
like,
yeah, absolutely.
starting with a woman's period, that's what we'll call week one, phase one.
So this can be, 5 days. For some women, it's 6 or 7 days. This is a time, if you think about what our ancestors did, the women would get together in the village. Now I'm talking about like village time, right? There was that hut that they would go to, and they would bring their creativeness into that space. They would be creating things together. They would be talking about what's happening in the village. They would be connecting with each other, because when you're around other women and very anchored into the land and the moon, you're probably bleeding together. So it was a time for them to connect. Now, the relationship to this hut changed, or this tent changed over time and was turned into something else, but women feeling more shunned rather than honored. But the original idea around it was, this is an honoring time where we get to remove ourselves from society and our everyday duties, so we could reconnect with the earth and we could reconnect with the moon. Because often women would bleed on a new moon, so it's this opportunity for new beginnings. And there's this time in the new moon where there's some like darkness for about 3 days. Like, the moon is kind of figuring itself out. And in that is when we get to step into the shadow. We get to step into grief, because we're letting go of that month. Something is shedding from our body. The uterine lining is literally shedding, and we're able to let go and detoxify everything from the month before. Like, how lucky are we that we get to regenerate every single month? So we're letting go physically, but we're also letting go emotionally and mentally and spiritually. And we're just cleaning the slate to bring in the new that's coming forward. And when it comes to just, our physical body, it's a time of rest. It's a time of reflection. It's a time where, the body doesn't need a lot of food because we're letting go. So we want to eat things that are nurturing and warm, and like soups and stews and things that are just really easy for the body to digest. Dark chocolate is always a win around this time, but things that are just really nourishing for your soul is what we need to do at this time.
Okay. And it's really like, if we're listening, that's usually what we crave as women around that time.
Yeah.
There's something you did in the book too. I love all your quotes throughout there. And there's a quote you said, there's something about the moon, like how the moon is just as beautiful when it's dark as it is when it's light. And that quote makes me think of how you just described this phase.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah,
there's
absolutely.
darkness, there can be grief. And I don't know, I've often felt guilty when I used to feel that way. Thanks to people like you, I lean into it more now. And, it's a time of journaling or quiet reflection or, and actually I realized as you're describing this isn't when I write and create content, but it's when I'm thinking about it. I want to be kind of just in my creative bubble.
Yeah, you want to be in that cave. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, but our society doesn't allow for that, right? Our jobs don't allow for that. Our expectation even of ourselves don't allow for that, because then that guilt shows up if I'm not showing up the same way. So how do we, in our modern world, is the question, how do we bring that back, or in a way that feels doable for us? Maybe it's connecting and communicating to our families. Hey, this is when my cycle is showing up. So this is a time that maybe I need to go have my facial. This is a time maybe when I need to just have my cup of tea by myself. This is a time where I'm going to take moments in the day just to be with me. So it's got nothing to do with you, but this is what I need to rejuvenate myself.
Again, amazing role modeling.
Yes, exactly. Especially if you have daughters at home that are going to be faced with this. If we start that routine now, they learn that, oh, this is normal. When mom is bleeding, this is what happens. My boys know when I'm bleeding. They know if I'm sitting with that cup of tea for more than an hour in the morning, they're like, oh, okay, she's on the couch. She never sits on the couch. That means there's something going on. This is when we're watching cooking shows together. This is when we're going for gentle walks together. They know mom's bleeding, and the requirement of her shifts during those couple of days.
And what incredible husbands they'll be one day with that knowledge.
Right? Yes. Yeah.
Okay. So before we go on to phase 2, unless you have anything else about phase 1.
No.
Okay. What about, so that everyone gets to benefit from this, what about people that don't have a regular cycle or don't bleed anymore? How can they use the same thing before we talk more on the next phases?
Yeah, so this is where the moon comes in. It's called a moon cycle for a reason. So you can tap into the energy of the moon. So around the new moon, you would kind of say that is that time of deep reflection and letting go. And what can I bring in to my life that's going to allow that space for those few days? And then as you're moving through that moon cycle with a calendar, this is where this can show up, that week 1, week 2, week 3, you can do these different things still to align yourself with the moon.
Perfect. Okay. So phase 1 is for women, like the day they start bleeding, phase 1 starts. Yeah. And then if you're not regular with your cycles, or if you're no longer bleeding, it would be a new moon starts, and that's your beginning of phase 1.
Yeah, absolutely.
What hormones are playing a major role there?
Yeah, essentially your so follicle stimulating hormone, which is FSH, that's starting to rise. All the other hormones are nice and low. Your estrogen is low, your progesterone is low. Like I said before, it's just a time of letting go. So everything is low, but your body's getting ready already for the next month. It's already getting ready for ovulation. So FSH is just starting to rise to signal your estrogen, which will then signal your LH at ovulation.
Okay. Phase 2.
Phase 2. So this is that follicular phase. So this is the phase of like Wonder Woman, Superwoman, whatever woman you want to label it as, but this is our doing phase. This is
my
where
favorite phase.
Right? This is where estrogen, which is, estrogen got such a bad rap these days because many of us do deal with estrogen dominance and the different things that show up with it and the toxicity in environment and all of that. But if we look purely at estrogen, it's such a beautiful hormone. It's the one that makes us feel voluptuous. It's the one that reminds us that we are beautiful. It reminds us of our inner and outer beauty and like what we can bring to the world, our expansiveness. It's very expanse. So it's like it wants you to be more outward, more action oriented, more social. So it gives you this permission to express yourself in just a different way. And then with that comes this little tiny surge, which we'll talk about soon with ovulation of testosterone. So they kind of work together and bringing this like attractiveness to you. Now, when we hear the word attractiveness, we usually have an image of what that looks like, but it's not about that image. It's about your inner world and your self-love. This is a time where that's being expressed out. Your pheromones are active because your body's whole ideal around that time is, how do I attract that one so that I can make that baby? Like that's what the body is trying to do, whether that happens or not, but that's what it's getting ready for. So you might feel a little bit, like I was saying before, more voluptuous and just more wanting to attract life. And if you're not in a relationship, maybe that's more creativity with what work you're doing. Maybe you're having your meetings then, maybe you're starting that new project at that time. This is the time to really do that.
And so phase 2 is like would you say day 8 to 14 for most women?
For most women,
a sliding.
There's absolutely, there's variability there. And then there's foods and oils and seeds and all the things that you can do to help support that, and specific herbs as well.
What would all those be? Like, what are some good specifics?
What you want to do, pumpkin seeds around that time. You want to do oils like EPO around that time. You want to do herbs like Shatavari is a Ayurvedic herb, which translates into having the capacity to deal with 100 husbands. So it gives you that like energy. So you want to do some adrenal herbs, possibly like ashwagandha, that's going to help support you. So there's all these elements that will help support that estrogen. Sage is another beautiful herb as well. Schizandra is another one. So these are some specifics that you can do, and that foods that will increase that estrogen. So this is where you can actually be more keto. You can fast a little bit more. You could be more paleo and work with that to support, again, that estrogen and testosterone.
Great. And then as far as workouts, what workouts would you recommend for this week?
Yeah, this is where you can do that HIIT workout. This is where you can do those runs. You can do hard things at this time because the energy and the capacity is there.
Got it. Okay. So before we move on to phase 3, like I would say in general, when you and I met, I feel like I lived in phase 2. But throughout all my weeks, because I just felt like that's what I'm supposed to do. Meaning I forced the behaviors that my body naturally would lean into in phase 2 throughout my entire cycle. So in phase 1, if I wanted to sit for long with that cup of tea, I didn't let myself. So I would slam caffeine until I could get myself out of it. And although I have felt healthy and balanced, I mean, I look back at some of the struggles I've had with Lyme disease and toxicity and just burnout and, adrenal fatigue and so many of the things that you've taught me, and specifically leaning to my cycle this way. It's why I love it so much, has so dramatically changed so many things in my life. It's like it gave me that permission to sit with the tea, to listen to what my body was begging for.
Yeah, there's such a disconnect that we step into when we're stuck in one phase, when we're stuck in the Duchess, right? When we're stuck in these archetypes because we feel like we're supposed to be in order to reach the success that we've defined for ourselves. And it isn't until we give ourselves permission to lean into this rhythm that we then all of a sudden start to see everything from a different perspective and understand that there's a superpower in all of it, and that all of it will feed what it is that we want for our life, that we're not losing anything. If anything, we're gaining by leaning into this rhythm more.
So then for women who maybe feel perhaps stuck in another phase, like it's harder for them to get up and go, do you feel that letting themselves go all in to where that maybe is, set up by design would help them come out of it in the other phases? Or are there other suggestions you make for people? that
Yeah,
feel
I
that way?
wouldn't say right away, because if
Mm-hmm.
they're really stuck in a state of depletion, we have to step into nourishment first. And if we go hard right away, then this is where like the nervous system comes into play if we're stuck in that sympathetic tone. So we want to bring in that parasympathetic, because even when I say this is our doing phase, it's our yang feminine, not our yang masculine, right? So yang is more of a masculine energy, but yang feminine is using our feminine energy in a way where we can do, but it's still from a place of grace, not from a place of trying to match that male yang energy that we're not designed to. So our doing looks very different than our counterparts doing. So like having that understanding too is going to help feed that.
Absolutely. Okay, perfect. That's super helpful. And then I know in the book you actually lay out specific
Mm-hmm.
pictures of stretches and yogi poses to do,
Mm-hmm.
all the different things to support those. Okay,
Yeah.
phase 3.
Phase 3, so ovulation. So this is where your testosterone is highest. So this is what I wanted to really highlight with this one. So this is where libido is supposed to be high, but we have this misconception that we should feel the same way every single day throughout our cycle. And often women will step into shame or step into like, what's wrong with me, when their libido starts to fall in that phase 4. But ovulation is that time where that is going to increase. Ovulation is the time where we release that egg so that it kind of sits ready to be fertilized if that's the desire at that time. And often at that time, we feel again a little bit more of that, like we're open because we want to invite in. Like we're fully open, ripe, and ready is kind of the energetic feeling around that time. So this is also not necessarily a time of doing, but this is where the being starts. So we're just being and sitting. There's a story that I shared on one of Zach Bush's webinars about this embryology piece and development. And one of the stories that I shared was that when the ovum comes through the fallopian tube, it actually literally sits there and like a queen on her throne and waits for the
I
sperm,
love that
and
visual.
billions of right, billions of sperm come in, you know, bowing down and
Uh-huh.
basically presenting themselves. And there's a chemical that she releases when she finds the one that she wants to connect to. So it isn't until she says yes, it isn't until she gives consent that you can come in, that they can come in. And the heartbeats at that time are different, the beating. And as soon as she says yes, the beating becomes the same. And
Stop.
there's that
It's
connection. Yeah.
incredible. It's
I
so
know, it's so
incredible.
incredible.
Oh,
So
God.
that's what's happening at that time. Like she's sitting there waiting to see, okay, am I going to invite somebody in this month or am I
Mm-hmm.
not? So
Mm-hmm.
exactly. So we get to step into that diva place
Yep. I was just going to
at
say
that
that.
time for sure, and really step into that power.
Love it. Okay. And what phase of the moon is this one? And then we forgot to talk about the moon for phase 2 as well.
Yeah, so this is full moon. So
Okay.
in between new moon and full moon is that number 2 phase. But 3, this is full. So you can imagine the feeling of that, the fullness, right?
Mm-hmm.
We're vast and we're full and we're ripe and we're ready.
And then what kinds of things would you think of as far as like social commitments, doing or not doing around then, or
Mm-hmm.
workouts, food, all those things?
It would be very similar to like that second week, like you're still kind of doing that, but then all of a sudden like the body it's transitioning, so you may slow down just a little bit, maybe you're not working out as hard.
Okay.
The eating is still very nurturing and light at this time, because again you're getting, your mind is stuck on libido, your mind is like wanting to invite and have sexual intercourse and all of that, so it's not thinking about food at that
Got it.
time.
Okay.
So whatever's going to nourish that is going to be
So that's like a
supportive.
prime time for fasting. You could really expand the
Mm-hmm.
fasting window, intermittent fasting, no need for like 3 big heavy meals throughout the day.
I wouldn't say you would want to fast too much around ovulation, but what I would say is the food could be really light. Like it could just be soups and broth and things like that. So I wouldn't say water fasting so much around ovulation, but I would definitely say lighter is healthier at that time.
Okay. And why would you
Yeah.
not want to water fast? What would happen?
Because what water fasting does in the beginning, as we know, it's going to increase our cortisol. It's going to increase our stress hormones because we're creating that hormetic response. Like we're putting stress on the body to create health. So we want to do that in that first half, but in that moment of ovulation, then the body's like, oh, okay, I can't actually invite anything in because I need to fuel now my cortisol and my adrenaline rather than fueling the progesterone that's supposed to show up soon.
And then any oils, any like supplements, herbs, teas to support during that time?
I would say same as what you were doing before, and anything that feels nourishing at that time. I wouldn't even put any rules on it. I would say anything that's like nourishing and expansive for you.
Love that.
Yeah.
Okay, phase 4.
Phase 4. Okay, so this one is usually the challenging one for many. This when we haven't been living in sync, whether it's because of the toxicities from the environment, the foods we're eating, the stress we experience in that first half is going to fuel that second half. So progesterone now is starting to rise. Progesterone is our hormone that's more anti-anxiety. It's supposed to support our nervous system. It opens up the receptors for GABA in our brains to help really support that calmness in the body and mind. And this whole part is nurturing, nurture, nurture, nurture. So this is where we slow down a little bit. This is maybe where we do more stretching and yoga and lower intensity workouts. This is where we're going more inwards, maybe saying no just a little bit more to, commitments when it comes to social commitments. So we're giving ourselves time to reflect and understand what's happening in the body, because sleep might be impacted in this time if we're not in rhythm. Some women might feel more irritable and angry when we're not in rhythm. Some women might feel swelling in their body if we're not in rhythm leading up to this moment. So this one here, it's all about nurturing because it thinks you're going to be pregnant. So it wants you to eat more carbohydrates. It wants you to give yourself time for nourishment instead of depletion. So anything that's going to nourish us is going to support us here.
Okay. And what are good, healthy carbs that people should lean into? Because it will affect how they feel during that
Yeah.
time, right? Like if we lean in and
Yeah.
we're like, I want a massive pizza and French
Right.
fries and
Yeah,
it's
that's
not
like
gonna feel so good.
great question, because you want to again ask that question when you're choosing, is this going to nourish me or deplete me? Pizza is going to deplete me. Sweet potatoes will nourish me. Legumes and lentils will nourish me. Berries will nourish me. So there's so many whole foods that will create nourishment when it comes to higher carbohydrates, whereas we know the processed foods, the processed grains, and all of that is going to deplete me.
And that being said, too, I think for people that are maybe newer on this path of, say, eating healthy or, cleaner, and maybe are moving from some of the foods like pizzas or fried things that women stereotypically, it's like it's pinned on us that that's what we want during certain phases, whether it's pregnancy, our cycle. There's so many restaurants now that either have like sourdough pizza or, gluten-free pizzas with cauliflower crust and more wholesome ingredients that, go for it all in. And what I do a lot of times too is I'll put like really good olive oil or avocado oil on a salad, like a light salad full of really good greens. And then I put that on pizza during that time. So I feel
I've
like
seen you do that.
I love that food. It's like grounding and feels very nourishing. But I also feel like it's helping fulfill my hormones and what my body's asking for.
Oh, for sure. Absolutely. So those cravings are there for a reason, because it's often because we're missing something. And when we're craving so much, you want to ask ourselves a question: what am I missing in my life? Like, what in my life is not satiating me? So I find anything that shows up emotionally for us during that time is because it's something we haven't resolved in that month. And often it's a theme that's repeating itself every month. So this is a perfect time to question yourself. Why am I not feeling satiated with life? What am I doing that's not supporting me? What relationship am I still keeping in my life that's not serving me? So these are the things that show up for us if we're not, again, in rhythm, in sync with who we actually want to be and show up as. So here is like an opportunity. That irritability that's showing up is an opportunity to ask, where is this coming from? What do I need to shift and change so that I do feel centered and balanced?
Wow. Do you find journaling is a good tool for people for things like that?
For sure. I think it depends on your relationship with journaling. So this is a funny one for me. Growing up, I love writing and I used to write a lot, but it would be found. So then I would get in trouble. And so I find myself when it comes to journaling, I'm holding back. So I think everyone has to find their way of expression that they feel safe with. And maybe that's like voice noting into your phone. Maybe that is writing on a journal. Maybe that's just going for a walk in nature and reflecting. And I think there's so many ways that we all have. For me, dancing is like the number one way to connect with myself. And so I find a lot moves for me during that time. I don't necessarily need to vocalize or write it down often. So I think finding what your thing is can be helpful.
Love that. Okay, as we start to wrap up, I mean, we could turn this into a whole nother podcast. There's so much more information that I want to ask you, and maybe we'll do that. Dr. Sonya, what would you say can be the possibilities for women if they lean into the rhythms of their cycle?
Oh my gosh, it just opens up so much. I think the biggest possibility is self-love, falling in love with yourself again, and connection. Because when you start connecting, you are the center of your family and your community. You are going to create that ripple effect in your home and then outside the community and into the world. So the potential here is it's healing for everybody if you start to heal this for yourself.
Amen. Love it. Okay, so everyone, listeners, make sure you check out Dr. Sonya's platforms, her incredible podcast, Health Ignited. You get to hear from her husband, also Dr. Nick Jensen, amazing wealth of information, lovely human, love him so much. Your book, definitely recommend. So Sonya, what's your website again?
drsonyajensen.com.
Grab this book, buy it for a friend. It's incredible. And then also, leave a review on this podcast, share it with a friend. These are incredible tools and tips that people can implement right away that, as to Sonya's point, can absolutely help with self-love and compassion and connection. So thank you so much, Sonya. Thank you for sharing your expertise. Love being with you today.
Oh, thank you for having me.
Oh my goodness. I hope you got so much out of that interview. This is one that I was just dying to bring you guys to this platform. And I'm so glad that you finally had the opportunity to meet Dr. Sonya Jensen. She's a wealth of information. I hope you took some great notes. You can always go back and re-listen. I would recommend literally writing out week by week what things are great to do to be supportive of your cycle so that you can really lean into the rhythm that your hormones in your body are craving. Doing so is going to help you feel much more balanced and harmonious in your life. If you like this video, please go ahead and put a like underneath. Make sure to subscribe so that you don't miss any of my exciting upcoming content. And then please, my biggest favor, if you think of any woman in your life that could benefit from this information, please share. I'm on a mission to impact future generations to come. I know we do that through supporting other women, and you can help me by sharing this message with your friends and family. Thanks so much. See you soon. And what made her get so passionate about really understanding women's hormones? What Sonya does at the moments of blah, 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 blah. And sorry.